The hum of fluorescent lights in the emergency ward of San Diego Memorial Hospital was a constant companion to Sarah Lawson during her night shifts. For nearly a decade, Sarah had worked tirelessly as a nurse, balancing the chaos of the ER with her innate desire to help people. But tonight, something gnawed at her, a pattern she couldn't ignore. Over the past month, Sarah had noticed unusual shipments arriving at the hospital in the dead of night. Trucks bearing the insignia of Armitage Medical Supplies would back into the loading dock at odd hours, yet the inventory rarely matched the hospital's records. Boxes labeled as surgical tools or pharmaceuticals often went unlogged or were marked as damaged and discarded. Initially, Sarah chalked it up to clerical errors, but the inconsistencies piled up. She started keeping notes, and the pattern became clear. These deliveries coincided with private ambulances transporting patients from industrial accidents, many of whom displayed injuries inconsistent with their reported causes. "Still here, Sarah?" The voice of Dr. Neil Carter startled her. He stood in the break room doorway, his usual calm demeanor edged with tension. Neil had always been supportive, often staying late to review difficult cases with her. Tonight, however, his expression was hard to read. "Just finishing up some inventory," Sarah replied, gesturing to the files spread across the table. "Something doesn't add up with the deliveries." Neil frowned. "Paperwork gets messy sometimes. Let accounting handle it." Sarah didn't back down. "It's not just paperwork. I've cross-checked records. The supplies don't align with our needs, and some shipments don't even enter the storage rooms." Neil stepped inside, lowering his voice. "Sarah, I know you're thorough, but let this go. It's better for everyone." His warning made her uneasy. "Neil, what's going on? Are you saying someone is deliberately falsifying records?" His silence spoke volumes. "For your safety, just focus on patient care," he said finally, before leaving her alone in the break room. Sarah stared at the files in front of her, her mind racing. What could Neil know that he wasn't telling her? More importantly, what was she stumbling into? Her phone buzzed on the table. The message was from Jason, her husband. "Just landed. Heading home soon. Missed you." Sarah smiled, momentarily forgetting her unease. Jason Monroe was a man of few words, but every message he sent reminded her why she had fallen in love with him. A retired Force Recon Marine, Jason had spent years in the world's most dangerous places. Now working as a security consultant, he was finally home after a 6-month deployment overseas. "Dinner's waiting. Can't wait to see you," she typed back, her smile fading as her thoughts returned to the files. The drive home should have been routine. The cool night air brushed against her face as she rolled down the windows, hoping it would clear her mind. The familiar sights of the waterfront, fishing boats bobbing gently in the marina and the faint scent of salt in the air, were usually comforting. But tonight, the sense of being watched followed her. Every turn she took, headlights loomed in her rearview mirror, never passing or falling back. By the time she reached her modest home in a quiet neighborhood, her nerves were on edge. She parked in the driveway and glanced at the rearview mirror again. The car that had been following her was gone. Shaking off the paranoia, she stepped inside. The house was quiet, the faint scent of lavender from the candles she'd lit earlier still lingering. She locked the door behind her and immediately pulled out the files she had taken from the hospital. Spreading them across the kitchen table, she began piecing together the timeline. Late-night deliveries, private ambulances, injuries inconsistent with accidents, and one name appeared repeatedly: Armitage Medical Supplies. She was deep in thought when there was a sharp knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat. Through the peephole, she saw Neil standing on the porch, his face pale and strained. "Neil? What are you doing here?" she asked as she opened the door. He pushed past her into the house, glancing around nervously. "They know," he said, his voice low. "They know you've been looking into the deliveries." "Who's they?" Sarah asked, closing the door behind him. "The people behind Armitage," Neil said, running a hand through his graying hair. "The shipments, the injuries, it's all connected. They're smuggling something through the hospital, and they've been watching anyone who gets too close. That means you." Sarah's stomach sank. "Neil, what are they smuggling? Drugs? Weapons?" Neil hesitated. "I don't know everything, but it's big. Bigger than anything we've seen before." They use the hospital because no one questions medical shipments. Before Sarah could respond, headlights swept across the living room window. Multiple vehicles pulled up outside. "They found me," Neil whispered, fear in his eyes. "Back door," Sarah said, grabbing her phone. She had seconds to act. Quickly pressing the emergency button Jason had set up, she sent her GPS location and a distress signal. She didn't know if he would get it in time, but it was her only hope. They made it halfway across the backyard when figures emerged from the shadows. A man in a tailored suit stepped forward, his calm demeanor more chilling than any weapon. "Good evening," he said smoothly. "Ms. Lawson, Dr. Carter. We need to have a little chat." Behind him, armed men moved in, cutting off their escape. Sarah's mind raced, but before she could act, strong hands grabbed her arms, and the world spun into chaos. As a van door slammed shut behind her, plunging her into darkness, she could only hope that Jason was already on his way. The darkness inside the van was oppressive, broken only by the faint glow of streetlights passing through the small, grated windows. Sarah Lawson sat with her hands zip-tied behind her back, her heart pounding in her chest. Across from her, Dr. Neil Carter sat slumped, blood trickling from a shallow cut on his temple. The air smelled of gasoline and sweat, and the low hum of the van's engine only added to her sense of isolation. She fought to keep her breathing steady, focusing on the words Jason had told her during his time in the Marines. "Stay calm. Observe. Look for patterns. People make mistakes when they think they're in control." Her eyes scanned the van, noting every detail. The positioning of the armed men flanking her, the faint emblem on the driver's jacket, Armitage Medical Supplies. They were part of this operation, and now she was in the center of it. One of the men, a burly figure with a thick beard, noticed her watching him. He smirked and tapped the barrel of his rifle against the floor. "Don't get any ideas, lady. You'll stay alive as long as you cooperate." Sarah didn't respond. She filed his voice and demeanor away in her mind, knowing Jason would ask for every detail later, if there was a later. The van came to a stop, and the doors swung open to reveal a dimly lit industrial complex. Rows of warehouses loomed in the distance, their corrugated metal walls streaked with rust. Sarah and Neil were pulled roughly from the van and escorted into one of the buildings. Inside, the air was damp and cold. The faint smell of oil and mildew hung heavy as they were shoved into a small room with concrete walls and a single metal table. Sarah's eyes adjusted to the light, and her stomach turned when she saw who was waiting for them. A man in a tailored suit sat casually at the table, his polished leather shoes tapping against the floor. His dark hair was slicked back, and a faint scar traced the edge of his jawline. He looked up as they entered, his piercing gray eyes scanning them like a predator sizing up prey. "Ms. Lawson, Dr. Carter," he said smoothly, his voice tinged with an unsettling calm. "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Anthony Greco, and you've become quite the nuisance." Sarah refused to look away, meeting his gaze with a defiance that surprised even her. "What do you want?" Greco chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "You've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong, asking questions, taking files. That's dangerous. And Dr. Carter here," he gestured toward Neil, "should have known better than to get involved." Neil, still trembling, found his voice. "You can't silence us. People will notice." Greco held up a hand, cutting him off. "Let me stop you there. You see, no one will notice. The world moves too fast to care about a couple of people in a hospital. But if you cooperate, you might just walk away from this." "And if we don't?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the cold not forming in her stomach. Greco's smile turned icy. "Then you'll disappear, along with every trace of your meddling." Before Sarah could respond, the door burst open. One of the guards leaned in, urgency in his voice. "Boss, we've got a problem." Greco's expression darkened. "What kind of problem?" The guard handed him a phone, and Greco's face tightened as he read something on the screen. "Monroe," he muttered under his breath, then looked up at Sarah. "Your husband, I assume?" Sarah's stomach flipped. Jason had gotten her signal. He was coming. But Greco now knew too. "Get them secured," Greco ordered, standing abruptly, and double the perimeter guards. I want this place locked down. Sarah and Neil were hauled out of the room and dragged deeper into the warehouse. She counted her steps, memorizing the layout as best she could. They were shoved into a storage area and zip-tied to chairs, their movements restricted but not impossible. What have you done? Neil hissed, his voice a mix of fear and anger. What I had to, Sarah replied. Jason will come for us. He always does. Miles away, Jason Monroe was already in motion. The GPS signal from Sarah's phone had gone dark after broadcasting her location, but it was enough. His military-honed instincts kicked in, and he moved with the precision of someone who had spent years navigating hostile territory. His first call had been to Marcus Reed, an old Marine buddy turned private investigator. Marcus answered on the second ring. Jason, Marcus said, already picking up on the urgency. What's going on? Sarah's been taken. I need eyes on an industrial complex off Harbor Road. Sending coordinates now. On it, Marcus replied without hesitation. I'll get you satellite scans and layout details. Jason's second call was to Eva Tran, a former Marine Corps intelligence analyst who now worked as a cybersecurity consultant. Eva, I need you to hack into a local logistics network, Armitage Medical Supplies. Track their vehicle fleet. Got it, Eva said, her voice calm and focused. Sending you real-time updates. Jason checked his gear, a compact sidearm, a tactical knife, and a handheld communication device. He had lived through countless missions like this, but the stakes had never been so personal. By the time Marcus and Eva reported back, Jason had pieced together the situation. Armitage's vans had been tracked to a warehouse complex. Guards were stationed at every entry point, but their movements revealed gaps, small openings Jason could exploit. You're going in alone? Marcus asked, concern in his voice. For now, Jason replied. I need speed and surprise. Keep the backup ready. Back at the warehouse, Sarah was working on loosening her zip ties. Her hands ached from the effort, but her resolve only grew stronger. Neil watched her, his fear giving way to admiration. You really think he'll make it here? Neil asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah met his gaze. Jason always finds a way. In the distance, a faint sound echoed through the warehouse, a dull thud, followed by shouts. The guards exchanged nervous glances, their confidence beginning to falter. Jason was here. Greco's voice barked orders from somewhere beyond the walls. Hold the perimeter. No one gets in. But Jason was already inside. Moving through the shadows, he took down guards with precision, his every movement calculated. He reached the storage room where Sarah and Neil were held, his eyes scanning for threats even as relief washed over him at seeing her alive. Jason. Sarah's voice broke the silence as he cut her restraints. Let's get you out of here, he said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. As they moved toward the exit, the sounds of pursuit grew louder. Jason handed Neil a small flashlight. Stay close and keep quiet. They slipped through the warehouse, Jason leading the way. His military training allowed him to anticipate the guards' movements, evading them at every turn. But as they reached the final corridor, Greco and his men appeared, blocking their path. Jason stepped forward, his stance radiating quiet menace. Let them go, he said evenly. Greco smirked, raising a weapon. Not a chance. The next moments blurred into chaos. Jason moved like a force of nature, disarming Greco and taking down his men with a brutal efficiency that left no room for error. Sarah and Neil followed close behind, their trust in him absolute. Minutes later, they emerged into the cool night air, their path clear. Jason led them to a waiting vehicle, the engine already running. Marcus was at the wheel, his expression grim. Where to? Marcus asked. Jason glanced back at Sarah, his resolve hardening. We're not running. We're taking this fight to them. The warehouse loomed in the distance, its harsh floodlights casting jagged shadows across the barren industrial yard. Jason Monroe crouched in the darkness, his sharp eyes scanning for movement. The faint hum of the perimeter guards' radios drifted on the cold night air. He had spent years in places like this, hostile, fortified, and filled with men who thought guns made them untouchable. Tonight, those men would learn otherwise. Behind him, Marcus Reed adjusted his earpiece, his voice a low murmur. Perimeter guards, 12 total. 3-man patrols rotating every 8 minutes. 2 sentries at the main gate. 1 sniper on the northeast tower. Any cameras? Jason asked. Yeah, but they're on a loop, Marcus replied. Eva's got their feed. You're clear to move. Jason nodded, his movements silent as he slipped through the shadows. He was dressed in black, his tactical gear stripped to essentials. A sidearm, a combat knife, and a suppressed rifle. Every step was calculated, his years of force recon training making him a ghost in the night. The first patrol came into view. Jason pressed himself against the side of a rusted shipping container, his breathing steady as he waited. The 2 men walked past, their conversation muffled. Jason struck with precision, his knife a flash of steel in the dim light. 1 guard crumpled silently, the other following a second later. Jason lowered their unconscious bodies to the ground, quickly securing their weapons and radios. 2 down, Jason whispered into his comm. Keep it quiet, Marcus replied. No alarms yet. But you've got about 6 minutes before the next patrol hits that sector. Jason moved quickly, weaving through the maze of containers and machinery. He approached the northeast tower, the sniper's silhouette visible against the floodlights. Scaling the ladder with practiced ease, he neutralized the sniper with a swift blow to the back of the head. He took the sniper's rifle, securing it for later use. Tower's clear, Jason reported, moving to the side entrance. Inside the warehouse, Sarah and Neil sat back-to-back in a cold metal storage room, their wrists bound with zip ties. Sarah's fingers worked tirelessly, trying to loosen the restraints. Neil's voice was barely above a whisper. Do you really think he can get in here? Sarah didn't hesitate. He's coming. Trust me. Neil's laugh was bitter. I've never trusted anyone less than the people running this place. If he can get us out, he's a miracle worker. Jason doesn't need miracles, Sarah replied, her voice steady. He's spent his whole life training for moments like this. The sound of distant gunfire interrupted their conversation, muffled but unmistakable. Sarah's heart leapt. He's here, she said, a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. Jason's assault was surgical. Moving through the building's side entrance, he eliminated guards with a mix of stealth and speed. His suppressed rifle barked softly as he cleared a hallway, each shot hitting its mark. He paused at a corner, listening to the faint buzz of voices over a nearby radio. Get to the storage room, a voice ordered. Greco wants the prisoners moved now. Jason clenched his jaw. He had minutes at best. Marcus, update, Jason whispered. Main forces are still patrolling outside, but you've got 2 teams converging on Sarah's location. I'm trying to jam their comms, but I need another 30 seconds, Marcus replied. I don't have 30, Jason muttered. He moved faster now, pushing deeper into the warehouse. The sharp tang of oil and metal filled his nostrils as he passed rows of stacked crates. His path was blocked by 2 guards standing near the entrance to the storage room. They didn't even have time to draw their weapons before Jason took them down with a brutal efficiency. He burst into the room, his rifle raised. Sarah looked up, her face lighting up with relief. Jason. Stay quiet, he said, moving to her side. He quickly cut her restraints, then moved to Neil. Who are you? Neil stammered. The guy getting you out of here, Jason replied. A sudden burst of shouting from the hallway made Jason spin. He grabbed Sarah's arm and pulled her behind a stack of crates, Neil scrambling to follow. Seconds later, the door burst open, and 3 guards stormed in. Jason moved like lightning, his suppressed rifle firing 3 quick shots. All 3 guards fell before they could react. We need to move now, Jason said, his voice calm but firm. He led them through the warehouse, his senses hyper-focused on every sound and movement. Sarah stayed close, her faith in him unwavering. Neil, though terrified, managed to keep up, his survival instincts kicking in. The trio made it to the northeast side of the warehouse, where Marcus was waiting with a van. Get in, Marcus called, the engine idling as he scanned the area. Jason ushered Sarah and Neil into the van, then climbed into the passenger seat. Drive, Jason ordered. Marcus floored the gas, the van speeding through the industrial yard. Behind them, Shouts and gunfire echoed as guards realized their prisoners were gone. Jason leaned out the window, firing at a pursuing vehicle. A well-placed shot disabled the engine, and the car swerved to a halt. As the warehouse disappeared into the distance, Jason finally allowed himself a breath. "You okay?" he asked, turning to Sarah. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her. "But we have to stop this. Whatever they're doing, it's bigger than us." Jason nodded. "We will. But first, we get somewhere safe." They regrouped at a safe house Jason had arranged, an old cabin on the outskirts of town, isolated and secure. Inside, Marcus spread a map on the table, marking key locations. "Greco's operation is bigger than we thought," Marcus said. This warehouse was just one of several sites tied to Armitage Medical Supplies. They're running a network of smuggling operations, using the hospital as cover. Jason studied the map, his mind racing. What are they smuggling? Drugs? Weapons? "Both and something worse," Marcus replied. "The files Eva decrypted point to experimental military tech. Stuff that's off the books, probably being tested illegally." Sarah's face hardened. "They're using patients as guinea pigs." Jason placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll shut them down, but we need more information." "Marcus, dig deeper into Armitage. Find their main hub. If we cut off the head, the rest will fall." "And Greco?" Marcus asked. Jason's expression darkened. "I'll handle him." Sarah stepped closer, her resolve unshaken. "We'll handle him together." Jason met her gaze, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Together. The Arizona desert stretched endlessly around the team as their vehicle barreled down a dusty highway. The silence inside the car was thick, each member lost in their thoughts. Jason kept his focus on the road ahead, his hands gripping the wheel. Sarah sat beside him, clutching the printed map of the Phoenix facility, her eyes scanning it for details they might have missed. In the backseat, Marcus loaded and checked their gear, while Eva's voice came through a speaker connected to their comms. "The Phoenix site is heavily secured," Eva said, her tone calm but serious. "Multiple layers of defense, including biometric scanners and patrols. We're talking private military contractors here, not rent-a-cops. You'll have to be precise and fast." Jason nodded, his jaw tightening. "What about the layout? Any blind spots we can use?" "The southern perimeter has a service entrance," Eva replied. "It's lightly guarded, and their surveillance isn't as tight there. But you'll have a narrow window. Once you're inside, it'll get complicated fast." Sarah looked up from the map. "What about the internal layout? Do we know where the records are stored?" Eva hesitated before answering. "The main server room is in the lower level, but there's also a secure archive in the north wing. You'll need to check both to make sure we get everything." Jason glanced at Sarah, their unspoken understanding clear. They had no margin for error. As the team approached the facility, Jason pulled the car off the road, parking behind a line of boulders. The vehicle blended seamlessly with the desert terrain, its matte finish designed for low visibility. "Gear up," Jason ordered, stepping out into the cool night air. Sarah slung a small backpack over her shoulders, double-checking its contents: a laptop, a portable hard drive, and a set of tools for bypassing locks. Marcus adjusted his rifle strap, his expression unreadable as he scanned the horizon. Jason gathered the team. "Eva will guide us through the first phase. Once we're in, it's all on us. No unnecessary risks. Stay focused, stay quiet, and stick to the plan." Sarah nodded. "Let's do this." The team approached the facility on foot, moving swiftly and silently through the shadows. The Phoenix site loomed ahead, a stark, concrete structure surrounded by high fences and security lights. Guards patrolled in pairs, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. 2 guards, 50 meters ahead. Eva's voice came through Jason's earpiece. "Patrol pattern indicates they'll pass your entry point in 20 seconds. Wait for my signal." Jason signaled for the team to hold position. The seconds ticked by like hours until Eva's voice broke the silence. "Go now." They moved quickly, Jason taking the lead. He reached the fence first, pulling out a pair of wire cutters to create an opening. Marcus and Sarah slipped through after him, their movements synchronized. The service entrance was just as Eva had described, lightly guarded, with a single camera monitoring the area. Sarah crouched near the door, pulling out a small device. "Looping the camera feed," she whispered. "Give me a second to bypass the lock." The door clicked open moments later, and the team slipped inside. The interior of the facility was sterile and cold, its white walls illuminated by fluorescent lights. The hum of machinery filled the air, mingling with the faint sound of distant footsteps. Jason raised his hand, signaling for silence as they moved deeper into the building. "Server room is 2 levels down," Eva guided. "Take the stairs to avoid detection. Elevators are monitored." The team descended quickly, their footsteps muffled by the industrial flooring. At the bottom of the stairwell, they encountered their first obstacle, a locked security door with a biometric scanner. "This is you, Sarah," Jason said, stepping aside. Sarah plugged a device into the scanner, her fingers moving deftly as she bypassed its encryption. The door unlocked with a soft beep, sliding open to reveal the server room. Racks of computers filled the space, their blinking lights casting an eerie glow. Sarah immediately set to work, connecting her laptop to the central terminal. "I'm in," she said. "Downloading everything now." Jason and Marcus took up defensive positions, their weapons at the ready. The minutes dragged on as Sarah worked, the tension palpable. "Download complete," Sarah announced finally, holding up the portable hard drive. "We've got what we need." "Good," Jason said. "Let's move." As they exited the server room, an alarm blared through the facility. "Looks like someone noticed," Eva said through their comms. "Guards are converging on your location. You'll need to fight your way out." Jason led the charge, his suppressed rifle taking down the first wave of guards with precision. Marcus covered their rear, his movements methodical as he provided suppressing fire. "Left corridor," Jason called out, motioning for Sarah to follow. They reached the stairwell, but more guards blocked their path. Jason moved like a shadow, neutralizing the threats with ruthless efficiency. "Extraction point is 200 meters north of the building," Eva directed. "Your ride's waiting." The team burst through the facility's side entrance, sprinting into the desert as spotlights swept across the ground behind them. The sound of gunfire echoed in the distance, but they didn't stop until they reached their vehicle. Marcus jumped into the driver's seat, gunning the engine as Jason and Sarah climbed in. The car roared to life, kicking up a cloud of dust as it sped away from the facility. Back at the safe house, the team reviewed the data Sarah had retrieved. Eva's face appeared on the laptop screen, her expression a mix of relief and determination. "This is it," she said. "We've got records of every test site, every transaction, and every buyer. And we've got a name, Agent Zero." Jason's jaw tightened. "Who is it?" Eva hesitated before answering. "A high-ranking official in the Department of Defense. Someone with the power to bury this operation if we don't move fast." Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Then we bring them down, no matter what it takes." Jason looked at his team, his voice steady. "This is bigger than we thought, but we've come too far to back down now. Let's finish this." As the team prepared for their next move, the weight of their mission was clear. They weren't just fighting a shadowy corporation, they were challenging a system that had allowed it to thrive. But they were ready, and they wouldn't stop until justice was served. The Phoenix safe house was a small, nondescript bungalow on the city's outskirts, its faded beige walls blending into the desert landscape. Inside, the atmosphere was anything but ordinary. The table was covered in a patchwork of files, laptop screens glowing with decrypted data, and hastily scrawled notes connecting names, dates, and locations. Jason, Sarah, Marcus, and Eva, who had joined remotely via video call, pored over the evidence they'd extracted from the Phoenix facility. "Okay," Eva said, her voice crackling through the speaker. "The files you pulled are a goldmine. They confirm everything we suspected, and more. Falcon Dynamics isn't just testing weapons. They're experimenting with chemical agents, crowd control devices, and even biological prototypes." "Biological prototypes?" Sarah asked, her face pale. "Yeah," Eva confirmed grimly. "Early-stage weapons engineered to target specific populations. It's experimental, but the files show a disturbing trend. They're testing on unknowing civilians, under the guise of medical treatment, just like we saw with the weapons." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression dark. And they're marketing this data to foreign buyers. They're turning hospitals into live test labs. Jason's jaw tightened as he processed the information. Who's buying this? Eva's face appeared on the screen as she shared her findings. The usual suspects: rogue states, private militias, even legitimate governments with shadowy agendas. Falcon Dynamics is selling to anyone with deep enough pockets. Any idea who's protecting them stateside? Marcus asked. Eva hesitated before answering. This part is murky. The files reference a high-level connection in the government. Someone powerful enough to keep Falcon's operations off the radar. They're listed as Agent Zero. Jason's fists clenched at the name. Agent Zero. That's not just a bureaucrat. That's a handler, someone coordinating between Falcon and the buyers. Sarah's voice broke through the tension. What about the patients? Are there any clues about who's being targeted? Eva nodded. The records show a disturbing pattern. Falcon is targeting low-income areas, veterans, and people without strong family ties. They're deliberately picking individuals less likely to draw attention if something goes wrong. Sarah's stomach churned. These are people who trust the system, who think they're being cared for. And Falcon is using them as disposable test subjects. Jason placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We're going to stop them. That evening, the team worked through the files, dissecting every detail. Sarah focused on the medical records, her trained eye catching subtleties others might miss. Jason and Marcus analyzed the operational side, mapping out Falcon's network of facilities. Found something, Sarah said, holding up a file. This patient's injury report doesn't match the supposed accident. The wounds are consistent with high-velocity shrapnel, not something you'd see in a car crash. Jason leaned over to examine the report. What's the connection to Falcon? Sarah flipped through the file. The patient was treated at a Falcon-controlled hospital. The injury coincides with a weapons test noted in the facility logs. They're not even hiding it. They're just burying it in medical jargon. Marcus pointed to a set of coordinates on the map. One of the next likely testing sites is in Texas, just outside Austin. If we can hit it, we might get evidence that ties this directly to their buyers. Jason nodded. We'll need to move quickly. Falcon will know we've hit Phoenix, and they'll be locking down their other sites. As the sun rose over Phoenix, the team prepared to leave the safe house. Jason double-checked their gear, ensuring they had the tools needed for the operation. Sarah packed the files into a secure case, her hands steady despite the weight of what they carried. Marcus, you'll cover our exit, Jason said. Sarah and I will infiltrate the facility. Eva, keep us connected and disrupt their systems as much as you can. Got it, Eva replied over comms. I'll monitor their communications and scramble their cameras. The drive to Texas was long and tense. Sarah stared out the window, the desert landscape passing in a blur. Her mind replayed the horrors they had uncovered, the patient's injuries, the callous disregard for human life. Jason noticed her silence. You okay? No, Sarah admitted. I can't stop thinking about the people we've seen in those files. All those lives ruined for profit. And what if it's still happening, right now, at that facility in Texas? It probably is, Jason said bluntly. That's why we're going. To stop it. Sarah looked at him, finding strength in his unwavering resolve. Promise me something. Anything, Jason said. No matter what happens, we don't leave anyone behind, Sarah said, her voice firm. Jason met her gaze, his expression serious. We won't. They arrived outside Austin under the cover of darkness. The facility was similar to the one in Phoenix, unassuming on the surface, but with security that spoke to something more sinister beneath. Eva's voice crackled in their earpieces. You've got 12 guards on the perimeter, rotating every 10 minutes. Cameras are looping, but I can't hold it for long. You'll need to move fast. Copy that, Jason said. They approached the facility with the same precision as before, moving through the shadows to avoid detection. Jason dispatched the first guard with a swift, silent takedown, motioning for Sarah to follow. Inside, the facility was eerily quiet, its sterile white walls illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights. Jason led the way, his suppressed weapon at the ready. Sarah stayed close, her eyes scanning for anything out of place. They reached the records room without incident. Sarah immediately began searching for files, her hands moving quickly through the cabinets. Jason kept watch at the door, his ears straining for any sound of approaching guards. "I've got it," Sarah whispered, holding up a folder. "This confirms they're testing chemical agents here. And look, these notes mention potential buyers. This is the proof we need." Jason nodded. "Copy it all. Then we move." Before they could leave, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Jason motioned for Sarah to stay back as he positioned himself near the door. The guards entered moments later, their rifles raised. Jason moved with lethal efficiency, taking them down before they could fire. But the noise had alerted others. "Time to go," Jason said, grabbing Sarah's hand. The facility erupted into chaos as alarms blared and guards swarmed the hallways. Jason and Sarah fought their way through, narrowly avoiding capture. They reached the exit, where Marcus was waiting in the getaway car. "Move it," Marcus shouted as they jumped in. The car sped into the night, bullets ricocheting off the rear bumper. Back at their new safe house, the team reviewed the evidence Sarah had collected. The files confirmed Falcon's involvement in illegal testing, but they also revealed something more chilling: a direct connection to Agent Zero. "Agent Zero isn't just covering this up," Eva said, her voice grim. "They're orchestrating it. These buyers? They're being handpicked and vetted. This goes all the way to the top." Jason's expression hardened. "Then we take it all the way to the top. We expose Zero, Falcon, and everyone else involved." Sarah nodded, her resolve stronger than ever. "We're not stopping until they're held accountable. Every last one of them." Jason looked at his team, his voice steady. "Then let's get to work." The atmosphere in the safe house was taut, the weight of their findings pressing down on the team. The files Sarah had recovered from the Texas facility not only confirmed Falcon Dynamics' illegal testing operations, but also provided direct links to their buyers. More alarmingly, the files identified Agent Zero as a central figure, a puppet master pulling the strings from within the government. Jason paced the room, his movements sharp and precise, a stark contrast to the stillness of Sarah, Marcus, and Eva on the call. "If Agent Zero is coordinating this, they'll know we've hit 2 of their facilities," Jason said, his tone grim. "They won't let us get close to another one." "They'll do more than that," Eva replied through the laptop. Her voice was calm but carried a note of urgency. "I intercepted communications flagged by Falcon's internal systems. They're mobilizing their private security teams to find you, Jason. They're escalating quickly." Sarah leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What does that mean? Are they sending more guards?" "Not just guards," Eva said. "They've contracted a private military unit. Former special forces, handpicked for operations like this. Their orders are clear: eliminate anyone interfering with Falcon's work." The room fell silent, the gravity of Eva's words sinking in. "They're hunting us," Marcus said finally, his voice low. "What's the timeline, Eva?" "They're already in motion," Eva replied. "My guess? You've got 24 hours, maybe less, before they find the safe house." Jason's expression was unreadable, but his mind was already racing. "Then we don't give them the chance. We take the fight to them." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting we go on the offensive?" "Exactly," Jason said. "We know Falcon's operations rely on coordination. Their command center is their weak point. If we disrupt it, we cut off their ability to track us, and we send a message." Eva's voice crackled through the speaker. "That's a bold move, Jason. Falcon's command center isn't just a building. It's a fortress. I've pulled schematics. It's loaded with security." Jason nodded. "I don't expect it to be easy. But if we take it out, we buy ourselves time to go after Agent Zero and expose everything." The team spent the next several hours preparing. Eva provided detailed schematics of Falcon's command center, a high-tech facility located in Denver. The building was surrounded by armed guards, surveillance cameras, and biometric locks. Sarah studied the layout, her medical background giving her a unique perspective on entry points and potential vulnerabilities. "Here," she said, pointing to a section of the blueprints. "The loading dock connects to the lower levels. It's used for deliveries, but the files suggest it also houses their server room." "Good find," Jason said. "That's our target. If we can destroy their servers, we cripple their operations." Marcus assembled their gear, his movements efficient as he checked weapons, communication devices, and explosives. We're going to need a distraction to draw their forces away from the server room. I'll handle that, Jason said. Marcus, you and Sarah focus on securing the data before we bring the place down. Sarah's face tightened with concern. Jason, you're putting yourself right in their crosshairs. That's where I'm most useful, Jason replied. His tone left no room for argument. Nightfall found the team on the outskirts of Denver, their vehicle parked a safe distance from the command center. Eva was patched into their comms, her voice steady despite the stakes. You've got patrols circling the perimeter every 10 minutes. Cameras on a 45-second loop. I'll disrupt their feed once you're inside. Copy that, Jason said. We move fast and quiet. No mistakes. The team slipped through the darkness, their movements synchronized. Jason took out the first pair of guards near the southern gate, his knife slicing through the night like a whisper. Marcus disabled the lock on the loading dock door, and the trio entered the facility. Inside, the command center was a labyrinth of steel and glass, its corridors illuminated by the cold glow of fluorescent lights. Jason led the way, his weapon at the ready. Sarah and Marcus followed, their footsteps muffled by the industrial flooring. Server room is 2 levels down, Eva said through their earpieces. You'll need to bypass a biometric scanner to access it. I've uploaded a bypass program to your drive. Plug it in, and it should work. The team descended into the lower levels, their movements precise and deliberate. At the entrance to the server room, Marcus plugged the drive into the scanner. The device beeped, and the door slid open. Go, Jason said, motioning for Marcus and Sarah to enter. The server room was a massive chamber filled with towering racks of computers, their fans humming with mechanical precision. Sarah began searching for critical files, her hands moving swiftly across the keyboard. Got it, she said, her voice steady. This confirms everything: Agent Zero's identity, Falcon's buyers, and their testing sites. It's all here. Copy it, Marcus said, setting explosives along the base of the racks. And let's move before they notice we're here. Meanwhile, Jason made his way to the facility's upper levels, his presence a calculated distraction. He neutralized guards as he went, creating chaos that would keep Falcon's forces away from Sarah and Marcus. Jason, Eva's voice crackled. You've got reinforcements incoming. They're mobilizing from the north entrance. Jason smirked, his movements accelerating. Let them come. The reinforcements found Jason waiting in the main corridor. He moved like a shadow, his suppressed rifle firing with deadly accuracy. The guard shouts turned to chaos as Jason's assault disrupted their coordination. Back in the server room, Marcus finished setting the charges while Sarah completed the data transfer. We're done, Sarah said, holding up the drive. Let's move, Marcus said, leading her toward the exit. As they ascended, the building shook with the force of an explosion. Jason, Sarah called into her comm. I'm fine, Jason replied. Meet me at the extraction point. I'll cover you. The team rendezvoused at the loading dock, where their vehicle was waiting. Jason jumped into the driver's seat, and they sped into the night as alarms blared behind them. Back at the safe house, Eva reviewed the data Sarah had recovered. Her face was pale as she spoke. Agent Zero isn't just a handler. They're a senior official in the Department of Defense. This goes higher than we thought. Jason leaned over her shoulder, his expression grim. Who is it? Eva hesitated before answering. General Howard Chase. He's using his position to protect Falcon and coordinate their buyers. Sarah's face hardened. If we expose him, this all falls apart. Jason nodded. Then that's our next move. We take the fight to Chase. The team exchanged determined looks, the weight of their mission heavier than ever. The enemy was closing in, but so were they, and they wouldn't stop until justice was served. The safe house was alive with tension, its dim lighting reflecting the gravity of their mission. The team had spent the last 12 hours reviewing the data from the Denver raid, and the revelations were as shocking as they were damning. General Howard Chase, one of the most respected figures in the Department of Defense, was Agent Zero. His fingerprints were all over Falcon Dynamics operations, from coordinating weapons tests to arranging clandestine deals with foreign buyers. Jason stood by the table, his arms crossed as he listened to Eva's latest update. Her voice came through the speaker with clarity, though the stress was evident in her tone. "I've traced Chase's movements over the last week," Eva said. "He's operating out of a private compound just outside Washington, D.C. high security, but nothing we haven't handled before. The kicker? He's hosting a meeting there tomorrow night with representatives from 3 foreign buyers." Jason's brow furrowed. "What kind of buyers?" "The worst kind," Eva replied. "Rogue states, black market brokers, people who'd love to get their hands on Falcon's data. This meeting isn't just about selling weapons. Chase is finalizing deals to provide strategic targeting packages, everything they've gathered from their testing sites." Sarah's stomach churned. "He's selling out our country piece by piece?" Jason's voice was steady but cold. "Then we stop him. If we hit that compound, we can capture Chase, shut down the deal, and expose everything." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes scanning the schematics Eva had pulled. "It's not going to be easy. The compound is locked down tight. Motion sensors, patrols, and an automated drone system. And that's just the perimeter." Eva's voice chimed in again. "The compound's security is linked to an on-site command center. If we disable it, we neutralize their defenses. But you'll have to do it manually, no way to hack in remotely." Jason nodded, already formulating a plan. "Marcus and I will handle the command center. Sarah, you and Eva focus on gathering evidence. We need something concrete to bring Chase down. Once the deal's disrupted, we take him alive." Sarah's gaze was unwavering. "You really think he'll surrender?" "No," Jason admitted, "but he won't have a choice." The team left the safe house under cover of darkness, traveling in a nondescript van loaded with their gear. Eva stayed connected through a secure satellite link, her voice a constant presence in their earpieces. As they neared the compound, Jason parked the van in a wooded area half a mile away. The team moved on foot, their gear packed tightly as they navigated the dense underbrush. Eva guided them through the compound's outer defenses, her voice calm and precise. "You've got 2 patrols ahead, 10 minutes apart. Motion sensors are spaced every 50 feet, but I've mapped a clear path for you. Follow my lead." Jason led the way, his movements silent as he bypassed the guards. Marcus followed closely, his rifle at the ready. Sarah stayed near the rear, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. They reached the perimeter fence, its steel bars topped with razor wire. Jason pulled out a compact cutting tool, the whir of the blade barely audible as he created an opening. "Through here," he whispered, motioning for Sarah and Marcus to follow. The compound was a sprawling estate, its central building surrounded by smaller structures and a meticulously landscaped courtyard. Guards patrolled in pairs, their flashlights cutting through the night. Jason signaled for the team to split up. Marcus moved toward the command center, while Jason and Sarah headed for the main building where Chase's meeting was taking place. "Marcus, once the command center is down, signal us," Jason said into his comm. "Copy that," Marcus replied. Inside the main building, Jason and Sarah moved with precision, their footsteps muffled by the thick carpeting. The corridors were lined with expensive art and marble fixtures, a stark contrast to the blood money funding it all. They reached a study filled with bookshelves and an ornate desk. Sarah began searching for anything that might provide evidence of Chase's operations. "Here," she said, pulling open a drawer. Inside was a stack of files labeled with names and dates, contracts, buyer agreements, and payment records. "This is it," Sarah whispered, her voice tinged with urgency. "This ties Chase directly to Falcon and the buyers." "Copy everything," Jason said, keeping watch at the door. Meanwhile, Marcus reached the command center, a heavily fortified structure filled with monitors and security terminals. He placed a small explosive on the lock and detonated it, the doors swinging open with a deafening crash. The guards inside reacted quickly, but Marcus was faster. His suppressed rifle barked as he took them down, one by one. He moved to the main console, pulling out a data stick provided by Eva. "Uploading the virus," Marcus said into his comm. "Stand by." The screen flashed as the virus took hold, disabling the compound's security systems. Cameras went dark, alarms silenced, and the automated drones fell from the sky. "Command center neutralized," Marcus reported. Back in the study, Jason and Sarah heard the shift as the compound's defenses went offline. Jason nodded to Sarah. Time to move. As they exited the room, they were met with resistance, 2 guards blocking their path. Jason took them down swiftly, his movements a blur of precision. The duo made their way to the meeting room, where Chase was deep in conversation with his buyers. The general's commanding presence was unmistakable, his gray hair and sharp suit giving him the air of authority. Jason didn't hesitate. He kicked open the door, his weapon trained on Chase. Hands in the air. Jason barked. The buyers froze, their eyes wide with shock. Chase, however, remained calm, a faint smirk on his lips. "Do you have any idea who you're dealing with?" Chase asked, his voice cold. "I do," Jason said, stepping closer. "You're a traitor." Chase's smirk disappeared. "You have no idea how the world works. This isn't betrayal, it's survival. The world's a dangerous place, and you don't win by playing fair." "Save it for the trial," Jason snapped. Chase's hand moved toward his desk drawer, but Jason was faster. He shot the drawer, shattering it before Chase could reach the weapon inside. "You're done," Jason said. "Stand up." Slowly, Chase rose to his feet, his expression a mix of anger and defiance. "You're making a mistake. Arresting me won't stop this. I'm just one piece of the puzzle." "Maybe," Jason said, "but it's a start." The team regrouped at the compound's entrance, where Marcus had secured the buyers and disarmed the remaining guards. Eva's voice came through their earpieces, filled with relief. "Nice work," she said. "I've got the files you uploaded. This is everything we need to expose Falcon, the buyers, and Chase. The authorities are on their way." As sirens echoed in the distance, Jason turned to his team. "This isn't over. Falcon's operations might be crippled, but we've got a long fight ahead. The truth has to come out." Sarah placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll see it through. Together." Jason nodded, his resolve unwavering. "Then let's finish this." The federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., was a fortress of law and order, its marble columns and soaring facade standing as a symbol of accountability. It was here that General Howard Chase would face justice, the culmination of months of relentless effort by Jason, Sarah, Marcus, and Eva. The courtroom buzzed with tension as the trial began. Reporters filled the gallery, their pens poised to document every detail of a case that had captured the nation's attention. For years, Falcon Dynamics had operated in the shadows, exploiting the vulnerable and profiting from betrayal. Now, those shadows were illuminated by undeniable evidence. Jason sat beside Sarah in the gallery, their faces calm but resolute. Marcus was on standby outside, coordinating security with federal agents. Eva had flown in to testify, her role in decrypting the files pivotal to the prosecution's case. The lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Amanda Keller, opened the trial with a scathing summary. "This case is about greed," Keller began, her voice clear and commanding. "It's about a conspiracy that turned trusted medical institutions into test sites that used human beings as nothing more than data points. And it's about holding the people responsible accountable for their crimes." She gestured to the evidence table, where files, photographs, and digital records were displayed. "The evidence you'll see today leaves no doubt about the guilt of General Howard Chase and his co-conspirators." The prosecution's case was airtight. Eva took the stand first, explaining how her expertise had uncovered Falcon's encrypted network. She detailed how the data linked Chase to every stage of the operation, from coordinating tests to brokering deals with foreign buyers. "This wasn't an oversight or a mistake," Eva said firmly. "It was a deliberate strategy to profit from suffering, all while hiding behind layers of bureaucracy and corrupted officials." Dr. Sarah Blake followed, her testimony a powerful indictment of the human cost. She described the patients whose injuries had been falsified, their suffering reduced to statistics in Falcon's reports. "They trusted us," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the emotion beneath it. "They came to us for care, and instead, they were exploited. These people weren't just numbers. They were fathers, mothers, veterans, and they deserved better." The most damning evidence came from the files Jason's team had recovered during their missions. Contracts signed by Chase, payment records from foreign buyers, and detailed accounts of testing sites. It was a mountain of proof that left no room for doubt. Chase's defense tried to paint him as a patriot, claiming his actions were in the interest of national security. But their argument crumbled under the weight of the evidence. National security doesn't justify betrayal, Keller countered during her closing argument. It doesn't excuse using innocent civilians as test subjects or selling our country's vulnerabilities to the highest bidder. General Chase wasn't protecting us. He was profiting at our expense. The jury deliberated for less than a day. When they returned, their verdict was clear: guilty on all counts. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. The atmosphere was a mix of relief and determination, a recognition that while one chapter had closed, the fight for justice wasn't over. Jason, Sarah, Marcus, and Eva stood together, watching as Chase was led away in handcuffs. "It's a good start," Jason said quietly. Eva nodded. "The fallout from this will be massive. Other corporations involved in similar schemes are already under investigation." Sarah looked at Jason, her expression a mix of exhaustion and pride. "We did it. We stopped him." Jason placed a hand on her shoulder. "We stopped one piece of the puzzle, but there's more work to do." Over the next several months, the impact of the trial reverberated across the country. Falcon Dynamics was dismantled, its executives facing criminal charges. The Department of Defense implemented sweeping reforms, ensuring greater oversight and accountability. Sarah returned to Harborview Medical Center, where her courage had first uncovered the conspiracy. She spearheaded new initiatives to protect patients and strengthen medical ethics. Jason, Marcus, and Eva continued their work, uncovering corruption and holding those in power accountable. The battle was far from over, but they knew they had made a difference. One evening, as the sun set over Washington, Jason and Sarah sat on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. The city's lights sparkled in the distance, a testament to resilience and hope. "Do you ever think about what's next?" Sarah asked, her voice soft. "All the time," Jason said. "But for now, I'm just glad we made it this far." Sarah smiled, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Me too." As the night deepened, they sat in silence, their bond strengthened by the trials they had faced together. They had uncovered a dark conspiracy, but they had also proven that justice could prevail. And as long as there were battles to fight, they would face them together. The stars shone brightly overhead, a reminder that even in the darkest times, light could always be found.